25% tariff on all cars imported into the United States from the 2nd of April. The US president claimed the measures would spur growth in the US car industry. Analysts estimate that 25% tariffs on car parts from Mexico and Canada could add between $4,000 and $10,000 in costs.
Been seen before I was elected, we were losing all of our plants that were being built in Mexico and Canada and other places. Now those plants largely have stopped and they're moving them to our country. And
your new car just became $10,000 more expensive overnight. With President Trump's shock announcement of 25% tariffs on all imported vehicles starting April 2025, the global auto industry is facing unprecedented disruption. Nearly half of all cars sold in America were imported last year. Now, manufacturers are halting production lines, automakers' stocks are plummeting, and consumers are bracing for the largest price hike in automotive history. The question is not if you'll pay more, but how much more. The global automotive industry was caught completely off guard when President Trump announced the sweeping 25% tariff on imported vehicles and parts. What makes this policy particularly significant is its extraordinary scope, targeting not merely finished automobiles, but extending deep into the supply chain to include critical components that form the backbone of modern vehicle manufacturing. Looking at the White House fact sheet, the administration has been methodical in its approach, specifically targeting engines, transmissions, powertrain components, and electrical systems. This presents an unprecedented challenge for an industry that has spent decades building global supply networks focused on efficiency rather than avoiding tariff boundaries. The announcement carries massive implications, as these components represent the most valuable and technologically complex aspects of vehicle production. Market reaction was immediate and brutal. General Motors experienced a devastating 8% drop in aftermarket trading, while Ford and Stellantis each saw their shares tumble by approximately 4.5%. The impact wasn't limited to American manufacturers. Asian automakers felt the shock too, with Toyota, Honda, and Hyundai suffering stock price declines between 3% and 4%.
This new administration, as these tariff and consumer headlines continue to hit the sector, Tesla by far the worst performer, that blue line at the bottom of that chart.
After surging following Trump's election win, Tesla's share price has plunged, losing around half its value since peaking in December, falling back to pre-election levels.
Even Tesla, which produces primarily within U.S. borders, couldn't escape the market panic, losing 1.3% of its value despite its predominantly domestic manufacturing footprint.
This new administration, as these tariff and consumer headlines continue to hit the sector, Tesla by far the worst performer, that blue line at the bottom of that chart.
Tesla also alerting the Trump administration about the impact of tariffs. Shares on pace for another week in the red, adding to those historic declines over the prior few months.
In terms of annual deliveries, a number of analysts are now saying Tesla will not hit 1.79 million in annual deliveries as it did last year.
The complexity of these tariffs extends beyond simply taxing completed vehicles. An especially nuanced element involves how the administration will handle products manufactured under the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement, CUSMA. According to the White House, goods covered by this agreement will still face tariffs, but only on the value of their non-U.S. content. This creates an extraordinarily difficult accounting and supply chain challenge for manufacturers who must now track the national origin of thousands of individual components. What's particularly striking about this announcement is the implementation timeframe. With April 2nd, 2025 set as the effective date, manufacturers have been given what amounts to a near impossible deadline in automotive terms. The industry typically requires years, not months, to reorganize production processes and supply relationships. President Trump made the permanence of these measures abundantly clear, stating, "This is permanent 100%, which eliminates any hope manufacturers might have harbored about waiting out a temporary policy. The announcement has already triggered operational adjustments across North America. Some manufacturers have initiated temporary production halts, while others are urgently reviewing their entire supply chain architecture. The industry now faces the monumental task of analyzing every component in vehicles that contain thousands of parts, many of which cross borders multiple times during the production process. Even vehicles, proudly labeled as American-made, contain significant percentages of imported content, meaning virtually every automobile sold in the United States will be affected in some manner. This creates a situation where consumers shopping across all price segments will likely encounter higher prices regardless of which brand they prefer. The White House projects these tariffs will generate approximately $100 billion in new annual revenue for the U.S. Treasury, effectively creating a massive new funding stream that fundamentally alters automotive economics in North America. However, this projection assumes import patterns remain stable, a questionable assumption given the very purpose of the tariffs is to change those patterns. For industry executives, this represents more than a simple tax. It's a fundamental restructuring of automotive manufacturing economics that has been optimized over decades of globalization. The choices facing these companies are stark. Absorb crushing cost increases, pass them to potentially resistant consumers, or undertake massive capital investments to relocate production with no guarantee of long-term policy stability. Those drastic measures are just the beginning of what industry insiders are calling the great unraveling of North American auto manufacturing. When a vehicle contains thousands of components that cross borders repeatedly during assembly, what was once a model of efficiency has transformed overnight into a financial liability, threatening to collapse the entire supply chain. The carefully constructed integration that took 3 decades to perfect now faces systematic dismantling in a matter of months. The immediate production adjustments seen across North America reveal how quickly tariffs can disrupt established manufacturing networks. Stellantis has implemented temporary production halts that extend beyond just their Canadian and Mexican facilities. The ripple effects are already touching U.S. powertrain and stamping facilities where American workers face uncertain schedules. Toyota's decision to cancel overtime at its Guanajuato plant similarly signals the beginning of widespread operational adjustments as manufacturers scramble to mitigate tariff exposure.
The electric vehicle maker owned by Elon Musk is warning the U.S. government that American exporters could be harmed by countries retaliating against tariffs imposed by Donald Trump.
Sales have plummeted here.
I think his polarizing approach more recently, has turned some buyers off.
But it's Mr. Musk's politics that may be hurting Tesla most. His work as President Trump's government efficiency czar and his recent far-right leanings have drawn swift backlash.
What makes these tariffs particularly devastating is their compounding effect throughout the manufacturing process. A single component might cross borders several times during production, first as raw material, then as a basic part, later as part of a subassembly, and finally as an element in a completed vehicle. At each crossing, that same component potentially incurs additional tariff charges, multiplying the cost impact far beyond the nominal 25% rate. This cascading effect explains why manufacturers are responding with such urgency to what appears on the surface to be a straightforward policy change. The challenge of restructuring operations presents manufacturers with a nearly impossible timeline. According to industry experts, relocating automotive production facilities requires a minimum of 18 months under ideal conditions, and the current environment is anything but ideal. These relocations carry significant execution risks, potential cost overruns, and workforce disruptions that could destabilize production capacity for years. The harsh reality is that 3 decades of integration cannot be undone in the limited adjustment window provided. Part suppliers find themselves caught in an especially precarious position. Many have already taken a firm stance, with companies like Dana stating they intend to pass on 100% of any tariff cost to OEM customers. Car seat manufacturer Adient was equally direct, informing customers that tariff burden is not something it is prepared to take on its P&L on an ongoing basis, and that there will be a need for recovery that has to be passed through the value chain. European suppliers including ZF, Forvia, and Valeo have similarly warned they cannot absorb these costs without passing at least some portion to customers. This supplier position creates a chain reaction throughout the industry. Automakers face higher component costs at the exact moment they must decide whether to absorb tariff expenses or pass them to increasingly price-sensitive consumers. The result is a market where no participant can fully shield themselves from the economic impact. and every decision carries significant risk to market share, profitability, or both. We're already witnessing tactical responses from major manufacturers attempting to navigate these challenging waters. Ford has launched its From America for America discount program, offering employee pricing to all customers through June 2nd. A strategy reminiscent of General Motors' Keep America Rolling 0% financing promotion, following September 11th, 2001. Meanwhile, GM is adjusting its production focus toward U.S.-manufactured pickup trucks, seeking to minimize tariff exposure for its highest-margin products. European and Asian manufacturers are reconsidering their North American production footprint as well.
We're going to talk about that in a bit, but let me ask you first of all what you're noticing in terms of demand, given the tariffs that are in place now, and what you're going to be doing about pricing.
In the last 3-4 weeks, our life has changed. So tariff discussion went in. It's a very heated discussion, and we see a higher demand for vehicles and more traffic in our stores. Yes, we can probably give these hints, but you cannot expect that vehicles will produce in a bigger quantity. So basically, administer the vehicles which you have in the market, the vehicles which are...
Mercedes-Benz production chief Jörg Burzer acknowledged the company is considering making more vehicles in the U.S. as a direct response to tariff pressures. Similarly, Volvo car AB CEO Håkan Samuelsson has pledged to increase the number of cars it builds in the U.S. and move another model to its South Carolina factory. These adjustments represent significant strategic shifts for companies that had optimized their production networks around pre-tariff economic conditions. As manufacturers scramble to adjust their supply chains, American consumers face a stark new reality at dealerships nationwide. Sticker prices climbing by thousands of dollars virtually overnight. Goldman Sachs analyst Mark Delaney estimates price increases between $5,000 and $15,000 per imported vehicle, depending on model and origin. Even vehicles produced domestically won't escape the economic impact, with projected increases ranging from $3,000 to $8,000 due to their reliance on foreign-sourced components essential for production. What's particularly troubling about these figures is how they will disproportionately impact working-class buyers. A Reuters analysis reveals that most new cars priced under $30,000, the vehicles typically purchased by lower-income consumers, are manufactured outside the United States. As these affordable options become significantly more expensive or potentially disappear from the market altogether, many working-class Americans will find themselves priced out of the new car market entirely, creating an economic divide where transportation affordability becomes increasingly determined by household income. The crisis doesn't end with new vehicles. Cox Automotive chief economist Jonathan Smoke warns that as consumers shift toward the used car market, we can expect accelerated price increases as the tariffs are passed through and supply tightens, leading to price increases on all types of most new vehicles. This secondary pressure on used vehicle prices creates a troubling scenario for Americans seeking affordable transportation. Cox Automotive data shows dealers already maintain only a 30-day supply of used cars below $15,000, approximately 12 days less than the overall used car inventory, indicating a market ill-prepared for a sudden influx of buyers. Sam Fiorani, vice president of research firm Auto Forecast Solutions, confirms this assessment, stating the tariffs will push more buyers into the used market, which will also raise the price of used vehicles. This cascading effect threatens to transform what was intended as an industrial policy into a broad-based tax on mobility that most severely impacts those with limited financial resources.
And Trump has a rather unlikely ally in his push for tariffs on the auto industry.
Talking about UAW President Shawn Fain, who vocally supported Democrat Kamala Harris in the election.
UAW President Shawn Fain said, "We applaud the Trump administration for stepping up to end the free trade disaster that has devastated working-class communities for decades, and the Trump administration has made history with today's actions."
The United Auto Workers Union has taken a decidedly positive stance on the tariffs, with UAW President Shawn Fain praising them as a means to bring thousands of jobs back to working-class communities across the United States. Fain suggests these manufacturing positions could materialize through additional shifts or production lines in currently underutilized auto plants. This perspective highlights the complex balance between consumer affordability and domestic manufacturing employment that policymakers must navigate. International responses to the tariff announcement reveal the potential for significant diplomatic fallout. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney described the move as a direct attack on his country's automotive sector, while European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen expressed regret and promised to protect European consumers and businesses. Language that suggests potential retaliatory measures may be forthcoming.
Carney called the tariffs a direct attack on Canadian workers and vowed his country would rebound on its own.
We will build an all-in Canada network, often through that bridge, over that bridge, 6 times before final assembly. And in a trade war, that's a huge vulnerability.
Exports. She went on to say tariffs are taxes, bad for businesses, worse for consumers, equally in the US and in the European Union.
The German Association of the Automotive Industry, VDA, warned of serious economic consequences, stating the tariffs send a disastrous signal for free, rules-based trade and risk disrupting tightly integrated global supply chains. The United Kingdom joined the chorus of concern, with Chancellor Rachel Reeves declaring the tariffs would be bad for the UK and bad for the US as well. These reactions underscore how automotive tariffs could potentially escalate into broader trade conflicts affecting multiple sectors beyond the automotive industry. Beyond immediate price impacts, economists warn of potential ripple effects throughout the broader economy. Conservative economist Arthur Laffer cautions that decreased vehicle affordability will force households to reduce discretionary spending and delay major purchases, potentially triggering economic contraction in other sectors. J.P. Morgan Chase. CEO Jamie Dimon reinforced this assessment, stating the tariffs will slow down growth in an economy that had already been decelerating. Hope you like this video if you want to know more about the recent oil war. Click on the next video